Welcome to NYC Jewelry Week 2022. I'm JB Jones.
And I'm Bella Naiman.
And we're the co-founders. And we're super excited to welcome you to our 2022 virtual program here on our official YouTube page. Please hit subscribe so you can get access to all the other amazing programs we have here. And head to our website at nycjewelryweek.com to also check out the programs we're doing in person in New York City. And Bella, what's coming up next?
I'm really excited for this program called Sketchbook Scribbles, The Beginning, a peek into the sketchbook of Michael Robinson of David Michael Jewels with museum curator Emily Stoehrer of the MFA Boston. So take a seat for this great behind the scenes look. And if you have any questions for Dr. Stoehrer or for Michael Robinson, please feel free to leave them in the chat and we will make sure that they get them. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Emily Stoehrer. I'm the Rita J. Kaplan and Susan B. Kaplan Curator of Jewelry at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. And I'm here today with Michael of David Michael Jewelry.
Hi, pleased to be here.
And we're presenting here virtually for New York City Jewelry Week 2022. We're going to take a look at Michael's sketch notebooks. He's invited me to come and take a look. And for me, design drawings are always so interesting. As I collect jewelry for the Museum of Fine Arts, I'm always interested in knowing about the process and, where possible, also acquiring the sketches that I think so greatly inform the finished piece of jewelry and say something about the design process. And so here, this is a special treat today to get a sense of Michael's process as he's designing a piece of jewelry and how the drawings figure into the finished work of art. So you're in for a treat.
Yeah, thanks. I hope you enjoy it. It's a fun side of jewelry that you don't really get to see too often. So it should be interesting to have a look through and see what captures your attention even.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get straight into it.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about David Michael before we start, because I'm not sure everybody might be familiar.
David Michael is my brother David and me, Michael. That's where the David Michael comes from. We're identical twins, so I actually answer to either name. Most emails are directed to Dear David, because people think that there is a person named David Michael. So like I said, it's my brother and I, and we hand make colorful pieces of jewelry, probably about as many as 10 pieces per year. And yeah, they're all one of a kind. We hand make them and have fun doing so.
How long have you been doing that?
David Michael came about when my father retired about 8 years ago. Previously, we were in the family business.
Okay.
But I've been making jewelry since I was 14, professionally, and selling them to different people. So I'm 44 now, so for 30 years I've been making jewelry.
In New Zealand?
In New Zealand, yep. We were born and raised in New Zealand.
And your brother's still there?
My brother's currently in Australia.
Okay.
So at the moment, whilst I'm here in America, we communicate via Skype or FaceTime and still work extremely closely together.
And I guess as you start to show us the sketchbook, you can maybe tell us a little bit more about what that design collaboration is like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, because the sketchbook is from 2018 to 2020 is when this particular sketchbook was filled up. So I can talk about everything that was happening back then.
Great. Well, let's dive in and take a look.
Okay. Let's sketch through. So yeah, this is a sketchbook. I keep many sketchbooks. I tend to try to work on one from beginning to the end, but normally I find I have like 3 or 4 different sketchbooks on the go at any one time. These are my favorite ones, just quite a simple little plain sketchbook because the spine opens up and lays really flat, which makes it easy for sketching. And this is actually really interesting because this was a piece that actually got made, which is good luck, I guess, for the first page of the sketchbook.
Is that rare that something actually gets made?
It is, yeah. In a sketchbook, it's mostly just very loose, scribbly sort of sketches. So
and I guess if you're only making 10 things a year, then you have a notebook full
of
actually, ideas.
From a full sketchbook, I would think probably maybe 2 pieces would actually be made into a finished piece of jewelry. So for the first page, to have a piece that actually went through and and got made, it's quite special.
I know you have a lot to say about this piece, but why don't you tell us first a little bit about how you got started? Are you trained as a renderer?
No, not professionally. So in New Zealand, when I was starting out all those many years ago, there actually weren't any jewelry schools or design schools as such. It's New Zealand, as most people probably know, is a tiny little country at the bottom of the world. And back in I guess it would have been the early 90s, there just weren't jewelry schools. So as far as making jewelry goes, my brother and I would be dropped in the workshop of my dad's jewelry store before and after kindergarten. So that was our start to working with tools.
You're born into it.
Born into it, and I just never stopped playing with the tools, basically. So I've always just been a self-taught jewelry maker, and the same with drawing. I would just always draw and scribble at high school, and then when I started making jewelry, the scribbles just became focused on jewelry design and jewelry ideas. To be honest, I always found doing loose drawings in a sketchbook quite difficult. I tend to get very focused and very sort of like tight on things always. So working in a sketchbook and scribbling and things like that really helped loosen me up and helped the ideas to flow quicker.
That's funny because these are not loose. I mean, you've sat down to this notebook and you've really tightly come up with an idea here that feels kind of fully figured out. So when you sit down, like what's in your head? As you begin.
So again, I tend to be an overthinker on everything. So to be fair, when I sit down, I've normally already had the idea bouncing around in my head probably for many times. I've probably already drawn it in my head a number of times before the pencil hits the paper. So yeah, I mean, this particular design was for a koi pond brooch, which actually started in this instance with the aquamarine, was a portrait cut aquamarine. And as soon as I saw it, I had the idea for doing a painted miniature behind it of a koi and making a koi pond.
It looked like water to you.
It did, yeah. I mean, the blue color of the aquamarine just so much looked like water to me. And portrait cuts, I'm not a huge fan of when people do portrait cuts and don't put a portrait or a painting behind it. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine because they look great when they're new, but you just know that they're going to get dirty or something, and then like you're just looking through a cloudy piece of crystal. So I like to put a painting behind it and seal it up. So this particular one, like I said, is one that I went through and made.
Did you have the aquamarine sitting there as you started this?
I did, yeah, I did. I had the aquamarine. So the aquamarine was locked into place, and I sat down and I did the sketch straight away. You'll see later on, this idea actually came a little too quickly to me.
Okay.
And it just felt too easy, and I was worried that I was maybe doing something too easy and too obvious. So you'll see later on and throughout the sketchbook, I keep on coming back to that particular aquamarine and thinking what else I could do with it.
Did I challenge myself enough
Yeah,
here?
exactly. But I will just quickly show this. With this particular design, I developed it further.
So this is your loose drawing, and then
That's a
you
loose
take
drawing,
it and
yeah.
you
And I went through and I did
made something more
did
refined.
the little watercolor rendering a little more refined.
So this is watercolor here.
This is watercolor, yeah.
Wow.
Watercolor.
And can you walk us through some of the details of what we're looking at here? I mean, you have the date, you have the drawing, you have some other notes, there's numbers.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about
So
what we're looking at.
always, again, because it's what I've seen in coffee table books, I always try to date sketches. It just helps reference things. Again, if you see something later on, it's nice to be able to know when you had the particular idea, because ideas always get bounced around. So it's nice to know when you had the idea. In this particular case, I've got little notes on the gem's size. So the aquamarine was a 17.75 carat aquamarine, and the particular size was 32 millimeters long this way, and it was 4 millimeters thick. So just little scribbly notes to help me sort of work out the design.
And then you come to the watercolor and you have a number there.
Yeah, when designs go through to this stage with the watercolor rendering, again, they're dated. So the
So we're
loose
a few months
sketch,
later now.
yeah, the loose sketch was on the 4th of February, and this was by the 8th of May. I came through and decided that this was the one, so I took it through to a watercolor final design, and then it gets allocated a particular number, which works in with, I keep a detailed workshop logbook also as I'm making the piece, with each day's recorded with what I did on that particular piece. So it's just all the notes are sort of like kept all the way through and can be traced all the way through the design.
So as you get to this phase, does this assure that it's a piece that you've made, or do you have drawings of pieces that you did never make?
No, there are pieces that come through. Probably for the watercolor renderings, I would say I make about 10% of them into finished pieces, and the rest just stay as watercolor renderings. I keep in a scrapbook. I've got scrapbooks. Just like I've got sketchbooks full of sketches, I've got scrapbooks and albums full of finished watercolor renderings, which maybe one day I might go back to and make, but maybe not.
So what happens once you have the drawing done? Do you start to make the piece? Or does your brother make the piece?
There aren't any set rules. In this particular instance, I made the piece. So like I said, I had the aquamarine, and then I did the drawing, and then I went about collecting the other stones for this particular piece. So this one had little natural diamond rough cubes for the cobblestone edging and zarbrites and diamonds. So then I go about collecting those and making them. If it's a design for my brother at this stage, then the design will go to his bench and he'll sit with the design and he'll start collecting the stones and start making the piece.
And so what happened to this piece?
This particular piece I made up over, it took quite a while. It took about 6 months to make it. And that was part of the Magnificent Jewels sale at Sotheby's a couple of years ago. So yeah, it sold in one of the Sotheby's sale. And I think what I hear is it went to a collector in New York.
Okay. And 6 months is a long time to make something?
It's for us, it's about average, I would say, anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So it is one of the more complicated pieces. It was quite large. That's sort of actual size. So it was quite a large piece. There was a lot of work involved in it.
Because this is to scale. This
one is to scale. In the sketchbook, I don't tend to do things to scale. They're all just freehand sketches. I try not to use a ruler or anything like that in a sketchbook. I just want to be free and let the ideas flow. Yeah, as loose as I can be.
Do you want to show us a little more?
Yeah, so we're just going to flip through this.
And so what material, so you're using watercolors there. What are we looking at here?
Just pencil.
Okay.
I like using pencil, and I try not to use an eraser. Just let the ideas flow. This particular one was for wedding ring and eternity designs for a client. This one you can see was the start of a pair of earrings. This is a little phoenix design, and then there was a corresponding dragon which I'm working on through the different things, and this was the
red dragon.
A red dragon, yes, to balance the red in this particular ruby that was in the phoenix earring. And these I actually did a watercolor rendering for, which I don't have here at the moment, but I actually went through and made the pair of earrings. So I can put, again, not to scale, I can put the earring in here for like scale reference.
Do you prefer to do a mismatched pair as opposed to the same?
I do, yeah, I do. When you're hand making something, I really don't like making the same thing twice. So if ever I can, you can't really see that there, can you?
I wonder how it looks if you lay it down on the paper. Maybe.
If I'm making a pair of earrings, 9 times out of 10, I'll try to make them so that they're, yeah, it is hard to see. I'll try to make them so that they're different.
That's beautiful.
You can just see it there, not in much light.
It almost looks like the combination of an antique piece and a new together.
Well, I think because antique pieces of jewelry have always been such a inspiration, because they used to be made by hand back then and nicer materials and things like that. So I do love antique jewelry. It's always a big inspiration.
You have to show us the other one.
A dragon?
I'm sure people want to see both.
To see the other one, you have to come visit. I can grab the other one here. Let's see if we can get a better view of this.
There we go.
There's the red dragon. You can just kind of make it out there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And nice to see here how the scale has changed.
Yeah, it actually stayed reasonably, I mean, these are very loose sketches, but it stayed reasonably accurate to the sketch, which again isn't always the case because I'm hand making the pieces myself or my brother's hand making them. We're not locked into it has to be a certain way. If we're making something and we think of another idea even as we're making it, or if there's any way we can make it more beautiful, like we'll do it. We're not locked in.
Can change your mind as you
go. Yeah. The good thing about creativity is that there just really isn't any rules.
So in the case of the koi pond, you had the stone, but how does that usually work? Are you usually having a stone in front of you and thinking about it, or sometimes are you imagining?
It's about 50-50, I would say. Sometimes, actually, probably not. Sometimes we'll have the stone. Most of the time we don't have the stone. I'll just, again, when you have the stone, it's great. And we do have a collection of gems that we've collected over the years that will become different jewels. It's actually nicer to sit down without a gem because that way you're not restricted by anything. You can just let the ideas flow.
So in that case where you have a design that doesn't have a gem assigned, it seems almost like it could be harder because then you have to find the right stone.
It does, but again, the good thing is because we're just making these for ourselves and then they sell, but in the initial stage, we're making them for ourselves. So if we've done this design, for example, and in this particular instance, I like this, it came through the rough sketches and then a little bit more detailed here, and I've sort of said I like this, so we need to find a cushion cut. But there wasn't a particular color in mind, so like instantly I'm open to any kind of color. I settled and found a reddy orange sapphire. But like if I had to switch this to a square or an emerald cut, like I can design it. And even quite often later on, I will find a gem in our collection and look back through these old sketchbooks and say, well, I kind of like this idea for that, and then it can be developed further.
And is it always your choice which one you go forward with, or sometimes are you doing this process with a client?
So when I was younger, I used to do quite a few commissions with clients, and occasionally we'll still do a commission with a client where I work through sketches with a client and let them have a little bit of involvement on what they like. But I would say that's probably only 1 out of 10 pieces we do as sort of commissioned with client. Otherwise, we just work probably more like an artist does.
And you're talking with your brother about which one he likes and having together?
Yeah, so on the pieces I make, I just sit down and do it all myself. For the pieces that he's making, I'll sit down with him and almost work like he's the client, where he has input. Yeah, he has input, and he'll say, I've got this idea, which is such and such, and then I'll put it down on paper for him to look at, and he'll go through and he'll say, I like this element, but like this isn't what I was thinking, and so yeah, I'll work it through there. This is a couple of very rough sketches again for the aquamarine that became the koi pond, again where I wasn't sure, so I was working on different designs. These are just loose sketches again.
So are you working on one piece at a time? Like, how do you decide which piece to move forward with?
So always when I'm making a piece, I'm working on one piece at a time. Once I start making something, that's the only piece I'll work on making the entire time. But in the sketchbook, I'll quite often just sit with this on my lap whilst I'm watching TV or out in public. So in the sketchbook, it's kind of it's like the Wild West. The sketchbook, anything goes. There are no rules.
You're always sketching. But
always
the piece is always beginning to end.
Yeah, the once pieces are being made, that's always from beginning to end. But in the sketchbook, it's just ideas flow freely. There's no no particular rules, and there's not even like a particular agenda I'm setting out for. It's just the practice of just like unloading the brain a little bit on paper. These are bringing up the koi pond sketch idea again, and just thinking about how the brooch fitting might work. And with the koi ponds, we came up with the idea of having them be able to be displayed like a little work of art too.
I love that.
So they had a little stand that the brooch pins clipped into at the back, and then it was sort of standing up like this so that it could be displayed just like a little portrait almost on a mantle or on a desk.
How connected to you are your collectors? Do you actually get a chance to see how they live with these objects?
Yeah, with people that
display them this way?
People that purchase through the galleries that we deal with, we get to interact with them and we get to hear back. And again, when I was younger, we used to sell directly to clients, so we'd get more feedback. With the works that sell through Sotheby's, we actually don't know who buys the pieces. So sadly, I don't know whether they're displaying it as a piece of art or not.
Hopefully they're enjoying it that way.
Yeah, hopefully they can always reach out later on down the road. But yeah, that's just, again, so like you can see I filled up a whole lot more pages before I came back to thinking about the koi pond, because maybe over that time I had been collecting different gemstones.
Do we have the date on here to see how far?
No, on this one I haven't. Okay. No, I haven't dated that one. This is the start. Again, Sketchbook can sometimes be used for other things. The start of
I love this. What's this?
Yeah, the start of tattoo ideas for a friend.
Is that something you do on the side?
I've designed probably about 5 tattoos in my lifetime. Normally they're jewelry related tattoos, just like this one. This particular woman had 2 dogs that she wanted to incorporate in like a jeweled princess mogul sort of looking antique dog design. So this is sort of like a totem. Yeah, a totem with the 2 dogs, one on top of another. And this was one of the dogs here.
Oh, I love this. We were just talking before, we were flipping through some books here. There's a book on Fabergé that has a dog from the MFA's collection that Fabergé made. And I said, we have the picture of the dog that coincides with the finished object. And so here you have the same thing. Yeah. It's great to see the animal that in this case, the tattoo.
Well, that's why I actually left it in here, because you see things like this in museums and in other books, and like how great would it be to be able to trace back and see the actual dog. So yeah, I left a little picture in there. And she did end up getting the tattoo. It was based more on one of those other designs than this one. This was for a little stamp I was getting made for stamping some of my final renderings. So it's just ideas for how to lay that out.
And so that says Betteridge. So for a while, was your work at Betteridge?
For a little while, yeah. Betteridge had our works going back maybe about 6 years now. Okay. They had a little spell where they had our works in Connecticut there.
So was that really your introduction to the States?
It was, yes. Natalie Betteridge reached out on Instagram one day, actually not long after we first started making jewelry. For David Michael, we didn't have a business plan in mind. We were just making jewelry because we had come out of our father's slightly more commercial jewelry company, where we were making engagement rings and things like that, more production pieces. So we had all these creative ideas.
Was that in the days of Jules de Jour?
It was, yeah, Jules de Jour. So she reached out to us and said, "Who's representing you in America?" And at that stage, nobody was representing us anywhere. We were just locked away in the studio, letting all of these creative ideas flow. So we flew to Connecticut and met with Natalie, and yeah, they had our works in there for a couple of years.
That's great.
It's quite good, yeah. So this is coming back to the koi pond again, and this is actually quite interesting. This was when we had the idea to stand it up as a little piece of art, but I hadn't thought about how that would actually work. So I was thinking about different stands that could spring out of the back of the piece to have like a little leg, and then you'd need like a little sprung mechanism for it to clip in so it wasn't coming out of place. But all of these ideas were all adding way too much weight to the brooch, which would have made it uncomfortable and heavy to wear. So we went back and just came up with an idea where the stand was a separate piece, a jeweled little separate stand that the brooch pins clipped into.
And at this point, you've already made the rendering because we're in June, and so you're going back to
Yeah, I
still
had made
thinking
the
about
rendering for the
reverse.
front, but I hadn't thought about how it was going to work on the back yet. Again, because there's no set rules, I started making it before I actually 100% worked out how that was going to work, the back part of it. I knew what I wanted to look like from the front, but the mechanics I hadn't quite thought through yet.
So by June, at this point, is it on your bench? And
It's
you're
on my bench and I'm making it.
and you're
Yeah,
thinking
I'm
more
making
about the
it.
details.
And you can see here, these are the particular diamonds that I had to hunt out and the sizes that they had to be, and then different pieces of metal I was ordering. I'd make a little note so that I ordered the particular piece to cut the works from.
Oh, what's this?
So this is lover's eyes for a particular client. This was one where I was working with a client. They had two new little babies that they wanted a piece of jewelry making for. So this was going to be a double pin, a double-sided little brooch pin.
Oh, how lovely.
So I was going to have one baby's little eye on one side and then the other baby's on the other side that was going to swivel and flip around. And this was the client, the two baby's initials. So one's name began with an M and one began with an F. So it was sort of hidden in the jewelry design. And
I love these because the lover's eye is always so personal. You know, it's only the person who's wearing it who knows what it is.
Yeah.
And here to even have the letters kind of as an added secret message.
Yeah, well, again, it's just sort of a design. You might not even at first glance
you wouldn't
notice that they're the initials, but they were in there to represent both people. And then this is just one of the little sort of practice miniatures. Again, you can't really.
Why on a card? Why is it there on a card?
So I watched a great video on YouTube. Again, self-taught. So YouTube becomes a really great learning thing from the V&A. They had a little representation on how miniatures used to be painted back in the day, and they would paint them on vellum, and they would affix them to a playing card for strength, and then once you're finished, you'd cut the piece out and mount it in the jewelry. So I managed to track down some vellum, which isn't easy to do these days. And playing cards nowadays are too white and plasticky, so I got onto a online auction site and tracked down some antique playing cards, and this was just sort of a little bit of a practice go with a little baby portrait.
It's great to hear all the attention to detail, the things when it's finished you don't even realize went into it.
Yeah, well, once that's cut out and in a piece of jewelry, you don't think about it, but they always used to be painted this way, all the antique ones, which is really great. That's why I like looking through the antique books for reference too, because they often sort of explain more the materials that were being used also.
Happy Halloween, this is timely.
Yeah, so for Instagram, quite often, this was a few years ago, I'll go through and I'll just do a fun painting to put on Instagram. So this was the loose designs for a Halloween painting a few years ago. It actually didn't end up anything like this. You can look back on the Instagram page, you'll see it was a pumpkin design it actually turned into. This was, again, for a client. This was actually a very difficult design, and the client had these particular stones. These were actual size for the stones, and I said they're just not going to work or look very well on a ring, but she was dedicated to having them in a ring. She had the smallest finger size in the world, I think, so I had to show her how the stones would sort of overlap,
spread out on the hand,
spread out over the finger, and I tried to come up with designs that would sort of work, where you could put the finger in and then these would sort of flow over the other finger, but I finally managed to talk her out of not making a ring, which I was very pleased about.
What did you make instead?
She ended up getting a pendant and using the emeralds for something else. As you can see, it was like a 30-carat pad paraxia in the center, and then very large emeralds on the side.
Colorful. You said colorful is one of the things that defines your brand.
Yeah, I do love color, and we're sort of known for color. David and I grew up. Well, we were born in '78, but we grew up in the '80s, which is just known for the explosion of neon color and graffiti with all the color, and surf and skate designs with all of the color.
So you bring that into the work.
I try to, yeah. Well, I guess it's just part of who I am. And this was actually a client one too. Actually, client ones are quite interesting because they develop through more the design, and they have little stories. I should probably actually write the story and the inspiration here. This was
a rope and a boat
here.
here.
Yeah, well, this was for a client that had a sailboat. I forget what the sailboat's name was now, but it began with a Z, and this was the lettering style that was on the back of the boat. So this was the boat, that was the font that I had to use, and then I had to come up with designs. So because it was a boat, there was one that had a bit of a nautical flag sort of a theme. This one had just waves, and then the Z was going to be picked out in yellow diamonds. I really, really liked this one, which has a little boat sort of flowing on the Z, and then this was just nautical sort of ropes doing the Z. They actually went with this one, and I did make it. That was for a private client. Yeah, so I like little things like that.
The challenge.
It is a challenge. Sometimes working with clients, it is more of a challenge because you have limitations put on you. They can be fun challenges. Often they are fun challenges, sort of to make something that maybe doesn't work, to think of a creative way to make it work. But it's also fun just to be able to sit down and make what you want to make.
So these are an interesting piece, because I had thought that these were brooches, but I just learned that they're not.
No, they're a pair of mismatched earrings again. So this is a little complicated of a thing. We had these amethysts, and I was designing a pair of earrings for David to make. Actually, it was his idea, this particular earring. That as I was drawing that, I was also thinking of other ideas that it could be, and this design just came out. And at the time, I thought this looks like a rain cloud. So I wrote rain here. And then I thought, well, if there's going to be a rain cloud, there better be a sun also. So then I drew the sun. So this went into production with David, with the amethyst pair of earrings in turquoise. Again, you can look back on our Instagram page. There's pictures of those finished, and they sold through Sotheby's. But then this idea was kind of sparked. So that'll be picked up again later on in the sketchbook.
Okay.
Let me go back to those, and I'll show you how they are earrings.
So did you share the other idea with David? He said, no, thanks.
No,
I
love this design, so I kept it to myself.
Oh, okay.
I kept that to myself.
How did he feel about that when he found out?
Again, it was my sketchbook. He didn't know I was in there. He's probably just learning about it now.
Hopefully he's not watching.
I kept it to myself and came back to it later because, yeah, it was a really fun idea that got triggered in my brain, but I just need to thinking about it a little bit more. This is collecting the different stones for the Z pendant and just keeping an eye on those. This was, again, from the Phoenix and Dragon you saw earlier. So before I made them, developing what the head would look like, just a little bit of an exploded view of the head and how the wing might work.
So blowing it up so you can think through all the details.
Yeah. So when I'm making a piece, I'm more often than not working under a microscope as I'm making it. So when I draw things big, that's sort of like, that's about the size I see it when I'm often making them. And then actually, again, you can see I went through and drew it even bigger there to sort of develop the different layers and how they would sort of work. That was actually for one of the photo albums that I keep with all the finished renderings in it. For the 6th one, I was just designing how the label on the design on the side of the album would look.
So what's in the photo album? Do your clients get the drawing with the finished piece?
No, no. That's I'm kind of a little bit selfish with my sketchbooks and my finished renderings, and I say I'm allowed to be selfish with those because of the pieces, they end up going to other people.
So it's what you get to keep.
The renderings and the sketchbooks is what I get to keep, the kind of proof that I've actually done something with my life, because everything else gets to go out and be worn by other people. But yeah, these are very much kind of personal for me, and I actually don't really normally. Well, actually, nobody really gets to see the sketchbooks normally.
This is extra special.
Yeah, this is a little something different.
So when you're, if this is really proof of what you've done more than draw, you've made the pieces. And so how do you acknowledge on the finished watercolor which ones were made and which weren't?
Well, again, that's what the particular numbers are for. So,
I see.
So
Okay.
in the album, people do often flip through the photo albums with all the finished renderings in it. They've got this little number in it, and that little number is also tracked back through in I keep a workshop journal, like I said, so that number is recorded in the workshop journal, so it's recorded as it's being made, and often this little number will be put through in the sketchbook too.
Oh, I see.
So you get to see what sort of being done through there. This was for one of the trunk shows we had at Betteridge back in 2018, so I was just doing a little poster. And again, because we hand make everything, I don't like to get things digitally designed and have like a little PDF poster. Like I'll sit down and I'll draw the little poster and then print out flyers from it. So that's designing that. I just like doing things the traditional way.
This looks a little bit like Schlumberger here.
It does.
The arrows.
Yeah, I always love Schlumberger work and the arrows. And using hearts in different ways. There's a little heart shape split upside down.
Oh yeah, I see that.
Never went any further than that, but yeah, I just like them. It's kind of a Cupid sort of piece.
Yeah, exactly.
This design here, you can see sort of flowed on and actually became that. So I took the idea.
Interesting.
I took the idea of the different drop shapes and the sort of like swoopy clouds. But when I saw this is actually quite a famous intaglio of Catherine the Great that I saw in a book. And I just thought I'd appropriate it for a fun sketch. So it's actually in an important piece of jewelry. I would never like to see it taken out of that piece of jewelry, but I just thought I'd sit down and imagine if it did come across my desk maybe a couple hundred years ago, what I would have done with it. Yeah. So this has got little malachites to bring out the emerald and then sapphires.
Do you often do that? Make these fantastical pieces, or more? Are you kind of more grounded in things
if I'm making things and it's going on for a little while and I just need a little bit of a break, or if I'm away on holiday or something away from the workshop, I sit down and I do these fun sketches and I'll think about what I would do with like the Hope diamond or the Tiffany diamond or something. I'll design pieces for those. So yeah, they can be a little bit fun sometimes. And it lets me just design pieces for important stones that aren't coming across my desk every day. Again, this was just a fun sketch for Christmas again.
So there's this like whimsy in your work that, is a grown-up aesthetic that, doesn't necessarily, isn't as figural as it appears in the sketches, but there is that kind of sense of fun in your work.
Yeah, I like to have fun. It's what I do. You can't be serious all the time. And I actually really love Vidura. Vidura was a huge early inspiration for me. It's one of the first books that I got, the Vidura book. And he always had fun and was sort of cheeky with his designs and things like that. So I do like playing around with things and doing things that are important to me.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the finished design sort of looked like. Again, you can scroll back on our David Michael Instagram page and you'll see the finished design there for 2018. This is, again, playing with the different ideas that became the other final rendering. And you can see, again, no rules. Sometimes the sketches are smaller because that's the space on the page. Sometimes they're a little bit bigger.
So in this case, you found this intaglio in a book. How much are books informing your process?
I have a really big jewelry book library. I actually don't look through it so much anymore, but I've got kind of a photographic memory of what's on what page. So I flip through. I just love looking through, again, like pieces from the 30s and the 20s and stuff like that. So they inform the design, but I just try not to be a slave to them.
Right.
I'm trying to put my own spin on them. This was kind of more of a engagement ring sort of ideas again for a client. Working through them. This is fun. This was for a 4 carat type 2A diamond in very early stages of it. I ended up sort of liking this idea, which is why I put the little red star beside it.
Okay.
And then I'll come back to do that a little bit further on. This is interesting too. This is the very early stages. You can see we've got a 3-carat specitite here. And I was doing designs for it, and we actually ended up making a ring for this particular one. But whilst we had, in between having the 3-carat specitite and coming to make the piece, we actually found a really amazing spinel. So we added to the design.
Wow.
So that was the specitite that was going to be the whole design.
Where are you finding the stones? Are you going to Tucson or something?
We go to trade shows quite often, yes. But to be honest, nowadays, most of the gemstones find us. Different dealers that we've used over the years know that we like different things and unusual colors. If I bring that closer, can you get the color
that's
a little
better.
bit?
And also you can see this, you're making it look like silver-topped gold here a little bit around the edges too, which I think is interesting.
So yes, that's the little specitite that was going to be the design here, but it just sort of came the sort of more grown-up version of it. And again, we set diamonds all on the back also.
Yeah, you didn't do that on the other pieces, but it's nice to see the back of it and to see all the different angles. And the scale, these are big pieces. And if you're looking at the 20s and the 30s, maybe that makes sense because that's also a moment of larger size jewelry.
Yeah.
You see that scale carried out in your work in a really nice way.
So yeah, it's just fun how something so simple can sort of evolve into something.
It blew up.
Yeah, but it could have quite easily sort of focused on this design or that design. It's just what we like at the time. It sort of tends to flow on. So this is coming back to this rough sketch here. Gets thought about and developed a little more in these series of designs. I'll bring it a little closer, you can maybe see.
And you start to add some color.
Yeah, then it becomes this one with a little color study.
You really get a sense of the diamond and the way that you've played with the color there.
Yeah. This side was going to actually like carve little opals for in between the pave set sections. But then I did this sketch, which was one that's sort of like developing in tandem, the sketch, and I actually ended up going more for that particular sketch. So then I just drew it from a little bit of a different angle so that you can see what it is. And that one actually did get made. Also, I don't have that one here. That one's sold.
Do you have favorites that you don't sell because you're not ready to give up yet?
Sometimes we do hang on to them for a little while. Yeah, for sure. And it's not until the correct client comes in that, likes a particular piece, and then you might show them. These are the rough developments, again, going back to the rain or shine sketches. So these are thinking more about the weather and different shapes. It's changed from an usher cut to just a round, and different storm clouds and things like that, just playing up with the weather again. But it's just as it's developing, it develops again further on. These are the little lover's eyes again. This was actually a little gift I did for a client. So this is for their little dog, and made it look like a little dog's paw with pearls. This is kind of more of a technical thing. This is carving out little segments of turquoise for a particular piece, and what size oval turquoise I had to order to carve the little section I needed out of it.
You're not doing the carving yourself, are you?
Yeah, no, I am. I tend to try to do everything myself. So with the pieces I make, I do the stone carving and the setting and the making and the designing. So just everything.
I want to just point out how unusual that is, because we work in a field that's very much kind of compartmentalized. And so there's renderers and there's gem cutters and fabricators, and to be doing it all is unique.
I often say to people, jewelry making is like building a house where you have plumbers, you have electricians, you have house painters. There's different trades, and they're very different. Like one particular jeweler may be just a stone setter, and all they do their whole life is just setting gemstones. They don't ever make anything or ever design anything. They're just setting gemstones the whole time, and you have people that are just polishers or just designers. So, but to me, and to be fair, when I first started out, I just used to make jewelry. I didn't used to set my own things. But I'd make things and you'd come back from the stone setter and they would have ruined the piece or not set it how I wanted to. So again, being a little bit of an overthinking micromanager, I just taught myself how to do everything so I didn't have to rely on anybody else.
And here it really is your singular vision and your vision with your brother and how it comes through in the end, which when you're bringing in a lot of other people, you lose some of that. You have to be
I do like to think,
maybe.
exactly, yeah. I do like to think of our work a little bit more like art. And when you sign your name to art, I'm a firm believer that you should be making that art if you're signing your name to it. So I just do everything myself, and if I don't know how to do anything, I'll teach myself how to do it. It's like if you're an artist painter and you're painting something you don't know how to do, you don't just subcontract out the painting to somebody else. Like you paint what you can do.
In the history of jewelry, that's so unusual because if something came out of a major firm, there were lots of hands touching it that we'll never know who they were.
Yeah,
there was this anonymity.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference. To us, it's not product. It's not jewelry. It's not a jewelry product. It's not something that we're trying to make for a deadline or a collection. We just sit down and we make what we want to make. This is interesting. On this particular day, I was obviously out somewhere and I didn't have a regular pencil, but I did have a red pencil. So these are meant to be red designs or for red stones. It's just what I had on me on that particular day. So that particular page is filled with red drawings.
And we had put a question out on Instagram to ask if anyone had questions they wanted us to think about, and somebody had asked you about the pencils.
Pencils, yeah. So I always use a very dark pencil, except for this day, for instance. There's a brand of pencil called Blackwing pencils, and they just make a really dark pencil, graphite pencil that makes a nice dark mark on the page, and then you are in control. You can obviously make it very dark, or you can push lighter and have a much lighter line. But I also collect antique pencils also, and I love using antique pencils as I'm sketching. Just something kind of like a romantic thought of.
How antique is an antique pencil? How old?
Like from the 30s, probably mostly 30s or 40s. Back when there used to be, most of them actually were made in Brooklyn, in a long closed down factory. There used to be a lot of pencil manufacturers in America. I think there's 2 factories left in America now that makes pencils. So I collect Eberhard Faber pencils from like the 30s and 40s and use those. And again, I've quite often bought boxes on eBay where there's maybe 3 or 4 pencils missing. And I love thinking about what those pencils wrote or what they drew. Yeah, like if they wrote a love note or a message or drew. So yeah, I just love the history of well-made old pencils. Let's have a look. So this is interesting too. This is a design that I was thinking about for spirals and blue. And I just love this particular little spirally sketch here and develop that a little bit further on this page here so that you can see the colors.
I love that. The different shades of blue, that color combination is really nice.
And that became this final rendering. So that's a flat disc. I haven't made it yet. I actually do plan on making it. It's an earring. It's an earring, yeah.
Faint ear.
They will have to be a matched pair of earrings. That's probably why I haven't made them yet. This is an idea for a flat disc pair of earrings, and they're completely flat, and they just get a 3-dimensional spiral look from using aquamarine and sapphire and using turquoise and lapis, so that'll get sort of a 3-dimensional sort of a look. So that they eventually will be made, but I don't know when. Oh, this is fun. I actually did put a note on this one. This one I did on a flight from Sydney to Brisbane. in 2019. As I said, I'm from New Zealand, and in New Zealand we have traditional little tikis that the Māori people used to have that were often carved out of jade or greenstone, but they're quite different to this. But I always
we have some in the museum's collection. I think you would see
yeah,
it
I've
when
seen
you
them
visited.
there.
Yeah.
So this is kind of my, I guess, growing up in the 80s cartoon version of one, where it's kind of crossed with Mickey Mouse. So I quite often draw this little guy. I call him Tiki Toon. But yeah, I just did it on a flight because I'm a little bit of a. This is a fence at home that I was designing. Okay, so this is going back to the. This is, I remember this particular page. This was before I skipped ahead in my sketchbook, and I said, right, before I get too far on this koi pond, one last look to see whether there's anything else at all that should be that's better. So I went through and I just sat down and filled up a whole page of different ideas using that same aquamarine. And no, I didn't like anything else more than the koi pond, so it remained the koi pond.
And I don't know if you're ready to talk about it or if there's more images there, but the koi pond became a bigger project for you.
Yeah, one day after the koi pond was made, I was in Macklowe Gallery in New York talking to Ben Macklowe, and he kindly showed me a Lalique piece of jewelry that was in there, like a little floral brooch. And he told me it was a series that Lalique had made, and it was to represent courtship. So I think the brooch he had, the two floral blooms were quite intertwined. But he explained that there was one before that where they were totally opposed and separate. And then there was the one where they were intertwined. And then there was one where they looked totally spent and they were like dying and wilting. And I just love this idea of being able to tell a story throughout the jewelry. So I instantly thought of my koi pond and thought, I can revisit that koi pond in different seasons.
So where were you at in the process when that happened? Were you finished?
The first one I had already finished making,
okay.
And I just loved making it, and I loved the way that the piece had turned out. And I was in New York, and it was a cold. Actually, I might have been in New York for the sale in December at the Magnificent Jewels sale at Sotheby's, and it was cold and snowy. So I thought I can revisit my koi pond in the wintertime. And I designed a winter pond, which I have the sketch for here. Well, actually not the sketches later on in the book, but I'll skip ahead. It became this. So I had little mounds of snow and kind of like slushy snow on there. And to represent the pond frozen over, I actually used a piece of included rock crystal. So you know how the crystal gets the inclusion in it? So it looked like frozen water.
Oh, that's great.
But you'll see the loose sketches for that that I did.
And so when you did that, did you imagine these pieces, living a life together at some point?
I did. I kind of hoped to see them all together with one collector. And this particular winter pond I made, and they also sold through Sotheby's.
Okay.
And again, when they sell at auction, you don't really know where they go. But I think this went into the middle of America somewhere. And I think the summer pond stayed in New York, so I'm pretty sure that they're not with the same collector, but
maybe someday.
I'm hopeful one day in an exhibition I could maybe get them back, or the next generation when I'm long gone can get them all back and correlate them into in one viewing again. It would be really neat. This was for a bangle, this particular one, a little bit of a grotesque sort of chimera sort of a version of it. This is neat.
Here's a clock, it looks like.
Yeah, a little clock design there. And so I remember vividly I was designing this clock on the couch at home. And my cat came and laid next to me. So I did just a tiny little sketch of Buggy, my cat asleep on the couch next to me. She took off before I could finish the sketch. This was kind of the same motif again as that ring that I showed earlier. More sketches sketches. I remember I did this sketch when I was in the office in New York waiting to meet an important magazine editor, and I was kind of a little nervous. So I was
sketching.
looking out the window doing a loose sketch to try and get the nerves under control. So this
here
is,
we go again.
So this picks up, I guess I had finished the koi pond, and this is my rain or shine idea. Again, you can see where it starts out with the initial sketch with the usher cut. And at this stage, I'm starting to refine and do it, and started to hunt out what the central stones could be. And I came across some really great no heat sapphires, but they were oval. So from here on out, so you can see one was a white sapphire, one was a yellow sapphire, 8.5 carats and 9 carats. And again, they were no heat, just the most beautiful stones. So from there on out, then the different designs were always for oval, and you can see I'm thinking about how the earring back clip can sort of work, and yeah, that's kind of fun.
I mean, here you've actually drawn a gemstone.
Yeah, this is one of the sketches.
Color.
I'll have to zoom in again. This is one of the sketches I do with an ink pen. It's one of.
That's just a regular pen?
Yeah, it's one of these
amazing.
little Bic 4-color pens that we all had at high school. So they've got different colors in them, and these are really great because you can travel with them. You don't have to worry about the point breaking. You've got 4 colors in the one tool, and by building up the different layers with the greens and the blues, you can get really a lot of depth.
We've all used one of those pens, and I'm sure that we have not created something that looks like that.
You need to try it out.
Try
more.
again.
Yeah. This was again just a little logo-y thing. I forget what that was for. It's just for a little label or something. Again, picking up the rain or shine.
Colors.
Yeah. So when the sketchbook pages have these little things on it, that means that the sketchbook was sitting on my desk when I was doing one of the final renderings. So at this stage, I probably came to finalize the design, and I went through and did a color rendering.
Okay.
And as I'm doing the rendering, the sketchbook will just sit on my desk, and if the paintbrush has got too much paint on it, I'll just sort of like swipe it off onto the sketchbook. But it actually ends up making quite a pretty color.
Nice.
I like, yeah.
Do you have this rendering with you?
I have one of the little renderings of the finished sunshine. So you can see it sort of goes through to that sort of stage once it's...
It has the Chrysler building there.
Yeah, well, again, this is one where I designed, so this is when the piece was finished, and I was doing a little advertising poster for the piece.
So I see the other ring.
Yeah, for the finished ring. This was for a little show that we were doing at Stephen Russell in New York. So I just wanted to do a bit of a New York sort of a announcement. So
New York on a sunny day.
Yeah, on a sunny day with the golden hour light bouncing off the Chrysler building. And again, just different ideas. I remember this was for somebody's 40th birthday, so I was trying to do a stylized 40, yeah. That was kind of hidden. And again.
So you've been thinking about this one for a long time at this point, and at what point do you start to really think, okay, I'm going to make, I guess at this point you had thought about that because you knew you had the stones that you were going to use.
So at this point, I probably would have had the stones by this point. And I'm thinking, see, I will often start making when I only have the front design worked out. So sometimes I have to come back into the sketchbook and think about, how the back might work. Or sometimes I'll be making and you'll hit a design problem and you need to go back to square one and redesign things again. These designs actually became an emerald ring, again, that I've got here. You can see this square emerald cut. This isn't going to work again too, but it was for an antique emerald.
You're talking a lot about the gemstones, but I'm interested in pointing out here the metalwork and the layering of metals that you have on the back here. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, so again, just sort of like philosophically, we don't like rhodium plating. I don't like rhodium plating or plating of any kind. And to me, if you're using gold, gold is always yellow. So in our works, if there's yellow metal, it's always going to be 18 or 22 karat gold. If there's white metal, it's always going to be platinum. And then in this instance, this is made like the silver top gold pieces. So on the top, there's a thin veneer of silver that we soldered to 18 karat gold. So on the finger, it's all 18 karat gold. But the silver we can oxidize. It's like a natural patina. And that way it just makes the emerald sort of stand out and gives it sort of like a darker, moodier look.
Creates this really nice gray color, I think. And it's unusual.
It sort of makes, in my view, it sort of makes them, I use it when I want the metal to disappear and just put the focus on the diamonds or the colored stones. But this is a page full of different ideas for the stone before it became this. I actually really liked this design here too, where my thumb is, which I might pick up later on. It's the
come back to it.
Yeah, it's the good thing about keeping sketchbooks. There's always ideas to come back to. This is that spinel ring we saw earlier, sort of a concept when I sort of thought it could be a bigger thing than just a thing.
You seem to like this architectural shape.
Yeah, I do. I love swoopy sort of feminine forms, so I often play around with the pillowy sort of like swoopy points, but with a little bit of a point and a little bit of an edge too. This was really neat. I did design that little octopus piece back in 2019. Again, you can tell it got designed because it was on my desk when I was doing a painting here. So this is the rain or shine earrings that for a period I was thinking about making them with.
Here we go, finally.
Yeah.
You're teasing
I don't know
us.
how-
Full earrings that we've been teased about and tantalized by for the last hour. Let's see them.
So this is what rain or shine actually became. This is the sunshine one. And again, it's an earring, so it has a little earring back here. It's all finished nicely on the back.
Oh, wow.
A few little diamonds back there too, because why not? And again, terrible lighting for jewelry, but it's the earring.
What did you use for the clouds?
The clouds I actually carved out of mother of pearl.
Oh, wow. It's so thick.
Yeah. Well, it is thick, but I actually hollowed out the back, so it's extremely light. Each one of those little clouds weigh less than half a gram.
Wow.
Again, because they're earrings, you've got to work hard just to make them. This one isn't going to sit well at all because they're a little danglers.
There you go.
But yeah, there's the
pair.
Yeah, rain or shine, and yes, the earrings, not brooches.
And so how long, like from the time that you started that process to now you have them finished, it seems like this one in particular you were working through for quite some time.
Yes, because I was developing the idea whilst I was working on another piece. So it's quite good. It took a long while to find these particular sapphires. So it did give me time to work out, I think probably over the course of about a year, collecting all the stones. Yeah.
And have you shown them yet?
I have. Yes, no, I have. A few people have seen them. They've been with Stephen Russell in New York for a little while. But I actually got them back and I'm going to be keeping them for the foreseeable future because I just love them.
They're one of those ones you can't give up.
Yeah, I love looking at them. So as well as the renderings, for now I'll hang on to these for a little while.
So so you have these finished. What are you working on now?
Right now I'm developing the idea. Sorry, I can see this camera is wiggling and it's annoying me.
There we go.
Right now, I'm working on the idea for visiting the koi pond again.
So this will be the third.
This will be the third. Eventually, there will be 4, but right now, this is the third and final. And it's going to be an autumn time, seeing as it's autumn time here, and I'm seeing all the beautiful flowers. Sorry, not flowers, falling leaves in different colors.
Foliage.
At the moment, this is not the final rendering. It's kind of like a preliminary final rendering because I did this and I realized I need to put a whole lot more color in it. So there's going to be a whole lot more oranges and reds and things like that. But yeah, that's a loose idea for the autumn koi pond. And I'm going to use in this particular instance, with the first one where I used the aquamarine for a nice summery water, and then I used the included rock crystal for the frozen pond. In this instance, I'm going to use smoky quartz for the portrait cut. So it looks like brackish water that's been stained by the fallen leaves.
So you have 3 of the 4 seasons. That leaves you with summer. Is that right?
With spring,
Okay.
which I haven't done any drawings
Haven't
for
thought
yet.
about it
No, but that'll be full of wildflowers and little blossoms, maybe cherry blossoms, and then that'll be the last visit to the pond.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us here today for this really special glimpse of looking at these notebooks, which you're among the first to have ever seen, and getting a better sense of the David Michael design process and seeing some of the jewels along the way. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed sharing it with you. Thank you.
Thanks for looking through. Glad to be able to share them.